just a sec, I'm sorry. Got to hit like 10 buttons. Okay. So a little bit about civic humanism. And this is another thing that sprung up in the very, these governments that were mostly republics or governments by representation in Florence. And we'll get a little bit out of the video, but a couple of things in really quick. First off, the idea of civic humanism is that education promotes this idea, this concept, that it's almost like we owe something or must give back to society, aka something for public service. And this idea of virtue. Now, this virtue is not only leading an upstanding life, it's a little bit more than that, and I'll get to it. But the idea of we should not do it for our own personal good, which is kind of interesting because these republics, so much of the money and the founding principles of them and the leaders was to make as much money as possible. So you have these kind of contradictions going that exist to right about now. My guess is they'll continue to exist with education. Now, this kind of looks back at what about the Greeks? This is why they look back to this classical idea. And so the idea that we're going to get back to the way the Greeks were.
I can't have everything not playing.
Huh?
It helps me focus.
So you can't get it, so you're getting this down?
Oh yeah, I am.
Okay. Now, Socrates. Socrates, the Greek philosopher, and those of your first semester, we talked a little bit about him. Okay. 5 people gone today. Okay. But only 2 look like it might be COVID. Yay.
Well, I mean, that's.
So, this polis, remember, polis was a term, the Greek term. Do you remember what polis means? Or pola? Yeah, the city-state. And so that is, you must show that kind of give back. Oh, he also believed that most people were the average people should not have any voice in it and hated the fact that he followed them and died corrupted and was opposed to the Greek democracy. But still. And then Plato, we mentioned him once before in the first semester. He thought this concept that kings, this idea of philosopher kings, where most people can't govern themselves, but a king that's looking out for everybody else. We'll see this again with philosophers some of you might have heard of, like Voltaire, like an enlightened monarch, an enlightened despot. And so this idea that this highly educated elite will rule what's for best, do what's best for the people. And you see this all the time. And then with that, Bruni right here, and I just thought this picture, I don't know, the noses are hard to draw, but everyone has very, they're sitting in there, a very nice eagle nose. But practical politics, this civic humanism's idea, we've got to get above like this kind of education, of this lofty elites of education that have no real practical purpose. Practical politics should be taught. And so that's civic humanism, that's in Milan. And so what is virtue? Virtue was more than just, you might think about morality. It is the quality of being, now this is obviously written in the 16th century, of being a man. Now, you might look at it as humans, I'm talking Renaissance here, about being man, a man. What it means to be a good citizen and a good person in society. And so, it is individualism. You're going to learn for yourself, but don't think in terms of like greed, like individual, I want to get as much as I can. But this idea of virtue is stress your own personality, stress your own personal geniuses, what you're good at, learn from that. And also, by the way, what statue is that? That's Michelangelo's David. And we'll take the field trip to Florence and wait in line to see him. The head is massive, and I'll show you that later on. And the whole thing is to develop your own abilities as far as you go. In fact, you have a duty to develop your abilities and go beyond just simply trying to enrich yourself for personal pleasure. What the concept then is, what do you do with your abilities? You give back to society, public service. Remember though, this is an idealized goal. Me being in public service, I think is important, I think this is a great virtue, but not everyone might agree or still got to look at it in a different way. And so, while we're looking at this, these concepts are coming. Italy's where this Renaissance will begin. We'll get to the art in a second. We got to do a couple things about politics and the church, what's going on this time. Now, the church is still the church, the Christian church. It is not totally divided up yet into different sects. The Reformation is not hit. And remember, I said this yesterday. Catholic simply means all-encompassing. So, a couple things really quick. So, first off, Pope Alexander VI. And there's Pope Alexander VI right here. He's going to rule over this really dynamic, changing time. He was from the Borgia family. The Borgia family was a family that ran Milan, incredibly wealthy, also known for being very corrupt. There were everything in there from leading for popes, cardinals, civic leaders, also going to marry the king of France. Oh, a daughter was, so a very influential family. And he was infamous for showing the corruption in the church, especially after the Avignon papacy, when there were two popes for a while. He abused his power, extorted money, so basically traded favors for money, got power, made people cardinals, made people bishops. He also had many children. Now, by then, it was pretty much established practice that priests are going to be married to the church, essentially have pledged themselves to God, and therefore they are celibate. Technically. That was not clear 1,000 years ago, but it was clear by then. Yet he had many children. And it was just kind of the norm. He had many mistresses that just stayed with him. And you can make the argument whether or not about priests should marry or not, but to them, this was a clear sign of corruption within the church. And he might be best known for the Treaty of Tordesillas. Right here, he basically split the world between Spain and Portugal. He basically said Spain gets this and Portugal gets this. That should also give you the idea of his arrogance. And so what would Spain get? The idea that Spain would have all that's going to become New Spain, which we'll cover next week. Here, Portugal, they're going around Africa, and they would scoop up, well, plain areas. It's much more complex than that. By the way, since a Portuguese explorer accidentally went to here first, that's why this line gives a little bit of South America to Portugal. And that's why Brazil speaks Portuguese. The next pope, Pope Julius II, might be one of the most famous popes. And the reason I'm mentioning him here is we got to talk just a little bit about him, because we got to get back to Florence. He, another political pope from the Borgia family, but we don't need to know that. He was also called the warrior pope, and also very secular. What does secular mean? If you do not know, write down for secular, outside the bounds of the church. Outside the church. Outside the church. And he too was corrupt. He was corrupt by selling favors, and something we'll get to down the road called indulgences. Indulgences. Well, basically people could buy their way into heaven. It's a little more complex than that, but that's essentially what they thought they were buying. But he led the armies of the Papal States. Remember the Papal States? I don't have a map right here. I can show you this map. Papal States is about right here. Controlled by the Pope. He led his armies from the front, fought with armor, and yes, did what all heavily armored knights do, hack up peasants like everybody else. Yes, that was a Pope. It's kind of almost impossible to imagine the Pope doing that now, but it's like anything else in this world, the warrior Pope did it. And he almost lost Rome to France, and would be involved in this conflict. In fact, 11 years, nearly, there's a little bit over 10 years, would be quite a bit. Well, I'm trying to find the mouse and talking at the same time. There we go. He also would create a holy league with Austria and the Holy Roman Empire against France. And you're going to see this Holy Roman Empire against France for years. Holy Roman Empire, all this big blob right here. And this will be a conflict that will go on, well, arguably until the 1740s in some way. We're going to get to what's called the War of the Austrian Succession, but that's another war down the road. Yeah. Austria and Holy Roman Empire. Austria was part of the Holy Roman Empire, but this map actually shows it pretty well. They had the weird system of all the old feudal alliances where part of Austria was in the Holy Roman Empire and part of it wasn't. Why? Because. And you're going to see this Austrian influence in Italy all the way up until very recently. In fact, it's still there. This Tyrol region right here was controlled by Austria until 1919. And so if you go to this part of Italy, they speak German. And there are signs in both Italian and German. And it seemed like everybody there was a redhead. It's just a very interesting thing. You just, oh, they're all redheads. Okay, fine. He also commissioned Michelangelo to do the Sistine Chapel. We will talk more about Michelangelo later, but I just want to mention that. Why? He wanted people to remember him. Why do people commission art? They might love the art, but the real reason is, hey, who did that art? Why do you think all these people give money to colleges or to various places to have their names put on buildings? Because they love buildings.
To be remembered.
That's, to be remembered as buildings. No. So there's the Sistine Chapel, and if you want to see fun, go to the Sistine Chapel. I'll show you more about that down the road.
Were you
So,
there?
huh?
Were you at the?
Yeah, when he painted it. Yeah, it's fresco. You can lay down the plaster. I'll show you the whole nonsense. He had to build a special scaffolding that did not bolt into the wall. All of everyone. Okay. Moving on. So this is going to be a whole series of Italian wars while the Renaissance is going on, arguably ending the Renaissance. Here's the thing. All this wealth poured in Italy, and then you can imagine bigger countries are going, hey, there's money there. And so you're especially going to see the French versus the Holy Roman Empire and Austria. That's why the Pope tried to create the Holy League. And why do I do that? I hit the wrong button. So, Italian wealth, all that power in Italy, boy, you get Italy, you have power. And that's what's going to lead to a whole series of invasions. The Holy Roman Empire is going to try to come in with Austria this way, France that way. Now we're going to go through these fights. These are incredibly complex fights that we're not going to go into many details about them, except Milan. Thus I put down M. You like that? M for Milan. Milan, right here. They got into a fight with Naples, which is down here. So they asked France for help. So what did France do with their king Charles VIII? Oh, you need my help. He invaded. And this invasion, which would be in 1496, in some way would start a fight that would go all the way until, well, technically in this context, 1559. But you can see in 1800, Napoleon is looking back to that legacy here, Charles VIII, and doing it in 1800. And so, France invaded here, and so you can imagine what's going to happen. We need help from the Holy Roman Empire, and that is going to lead to a series of fights here. Florence, though, right here is in the way. What does appease mean?
Negotiate.
In a way, close. It's negotiating. right? Oh, it's back. Oh, okay. I could hear it, but I didn't know what it was. It's a vacuum cleaner. Everyone okay?
There was like.
Everyone good?
I think I gotta go.
There was like the
It's
term-
negotiable. What it means is giving in to aggression. So if somebody threatens you, say, hey, I negotiate, I'll give you whatever you want. Here's some land. I'll give you a big hunk of this area right here if you don't invade Florence. Has everyone got that? That's appeasement. So giving into aggression. Does anybody know the most famous example of appeasement in history?
World War I.
World War II, probably the best example.
World War
Giving
I
into Nazi Germany. Well, it's big, but World War II is probably the
was
best.
bigger than
And I wonder what's going to happen with Ukraine. Because that's what I think Russia's trying to get. They're trying to force.
Is it appeasement of Ukraine?
Yeah, they're trying to get some land and maybe to some kind of where he can make it look like the United States and NATO. Well, NATO back then.
I mean, the issue with Russia is like they have a lot of ports that used to be China's, and China might want those ports back.
It's coming. So the Medici family, which ruled Florence for years, when they tried to give land, this was used against them, and they were ran out of town. The Medicis ran out of town. And they were the wealthy banking family. And Florence went into absolute chaos. Why do we say this with the French invading? Well, this is going to lead to one of the most famous examples of a counter-Renaissance, a counter-enlightenment. Savonarola. I know I always get this wrong. I want to say Sarvin. Savonarola. There's him. That's one of the more famous paintings in the Renaissance world of him. He was a Franciscan monk, and he claimed he was totally opposed to this idea of all these wealthy, like the Medici family, getting wealth, power, banking. So he's totally opposed to that. By the way, is he really? No, because once he ran out the Medici family saying, I will restore, he basically said God's law, he took that power and ran. He was opposed to humanism. It's outside the bounds of the church. We will reestablish the church. Yes?
That was a city people for a year.
Hmm?
It's a city for a year.
He ruled for you.
Oh.
He lived for longer. He was a 1-year-old.
I had a rule.
A one-year-old holding on to all this power.
And hedonistic means leadership for your own personal pleasure, just your own personal pleasure. This has a lot of contexts. This could be good or evil, depending on what it is. But very corrupted. They did what the one of the more famous one in 1497 is called the Bonfire of the Vanities. So think about vanities are all these things for your own personal good or personal need that you don't care about anybody else. They burned everything. All these luxury items, books. And books were still incredibly valuable. All these luxury goods, they burnt them all in public. Of course, there's going to be a backlash against that, because the people of Florence were like, okay, we're mad at the Medici family for giving away our land, but wait a second. So, of course, there was a counter-revolution, and he was executed, and the Medici family was back. The French withdrew. But the reason I'm telling you this is because it's going to lead to one of the most famous books of the Renaissance era. Because there was somebody who worked for the Medici family, and then when the Medici family withdrew, he worked for Savonarola. Then in turn, he's going to be arrested by the Medici family and wanting to prove his value to them. A man by the name of, are you ready? This is one of the problems with showing the projector when we got the light. All of a sudden now the sun came out, and boy, the light reflecting off the snow really is. Did it melt any at lunch? Did you ever go anywhere at lunch? Or is it pretty icy or is it not bad?
It's pretty icy from part where all like the shops are.
Shops I see, you want to drive at lunch?
So it's kind of icy.
Do you all can take a drive really fast and just see what happens?
Yeah, you know, we should just like,
I
we
think
should
there's
honestly
some
like cut the
ice.
brakes and then just go.
I remember seeing ice this morning at the front door, but
We'll see. You can't really get an idea of what, this is one of the more famous works of art. It's in the museum in Florence now. But, I'm gonna leave that off. There's a lot of language here. I feel like I would like to. And so that is going to lead to Machiavelli, who's going to write The Prince. So he's in Florence. He was there with the invasion and the French withdrawal. He is there. The Medici family came in and had him arrested. And here is this self-serving, anybody know what a sycophant is? A sycophant is someone who just sucks up to someone in power. Like, I need more sycophants. I need people to just be lapdogs for me. Actually, a few things annoy me more than people like that. But he's trying to say, the Medicis are great, all this is great, everything you do for power is great. Because they went in, and after they executed I can't even say his name now. Savarella. They had left, I know, I said like 45 different times. They also executed over 3,000 of his followers. Just basically got rid of anybody who was following that before. And it's like, okay. And then arrested Machiavelli, and he was nearly executed. He was tortured. And he basically said, you were right to torture me. Let me out. It sounds like something you would see in the Soviet Union when Stalin was in power. Yet, it is going to be read by people for years and talk about the prince. So, he was in prison, and he wrote this book. He's trying to justify the cruel practices of the Medici family, but many people are going to use this as a political handbook. And this is going to be a political handbook for those who want to use power and believe the ends justify the means. Basically, they're going to use it to try to justify doing horrible things and say, see, I had no choice. If I don't do that, our enemies will take over. So to give you a couple examples of what it said, he would write that a leader must be feared. If you're loved, they'll take advantage. Feared, they will always obey. Speaking of that, so Nick did his test. Should we accept this for last quarter or not? Let's have a vote. Should I accept this for last quarter? Only one person. Wow. Well, better be feared than loved.
Yeah, he's too loved. He's not feared enough.
If you're loved, people will take advantage of you. By the way, is this true?
sometimes yes.
The world is far too complicated for rules like this. You know what this is? So someone's going to read this and say, oh, I can punish my enemies. That's a good thing. Or perceived enemies. Or people looking at me wrong. And then the ends justify the means, as I said before. And rulers are needed. If it's more important to do something and act. Act gives you power. It's value. Which, by the way, there's an element of truth there. And then sometimes you have to be ruthless. Which, by the way, would justify ruthless actions. But I can't emphasize this enough. It's amazing how people just like action. And the perceived inaction just infuriates people. Especially people who aren't only paying partial attention to their life. It's difficult to go through the process of life. And then they're like, why don't they do something? They don't really look into what the complexities of doing something. They just say, do something. Now, I have another assignment of Machiavelli, but there is a chance I'm going to be gone Monday, next week. I know. I feel your pain. I can see by your eyes you're going to be so distraught without me. And so if I am not here on Monday, that'll be a good thing to do on Monday. That's my plan. Does everyone approve of that plan? Who does not approve of that plan? Remember how ruthless I am. Okay, well. You just read. Did you hear that?
What?
The Grays.
They're after you.
It's a weird sound. If it's better to be feared than loved, should we just randomly choose people to go over the stops?
Yeah, yeah. And then everyone scares.
All right, so
He's just gonna point at some random person.
right after this happens, there's gonna be one more war we got to get to, this Renaissance world, and why we're going to end the Italian Renaissance once and for all. Another invasion. It's going to be called the Habsburg-Valais War. Habsburg, that's the leaders of the Holy Roman and Spanish Empire. That's Spain, Holy Roman Empire. The Valais, that's the French royal family. For a while there, the Habsburg dynasty would be so big, and we will obviously come back to it because it's also part of the Reformation. But I'm covering it here because it's so much part of the Renaissance. And so the fight is going to be over Italy. And the big prize is they don't want to take Rome, but control Rome. Rome will give you the power of the church. And so the Catholic powers, because they're still only Catholics, of the Holy Roman Empire and Spain are going to fight the French. And the French, in their desperation to win, would even unify with the Ottoman Empire, which the church still claims there's a crusade against. That should give you an idea how wars make strange bedfellows, and the enemy of my enemy becomes my friend. Catholic France, who wants to control the Catholic Church, unifies with the Ottomans. And what religion are the Ottomans?
Muslim.
But they have all the religions there. They let the religions go, but they're mostly Sunni Muslim, yes. And Charles V, the Habsburg monarch, would be the head of Spain and the Holy Roman Empire. Charles, Holy Roman Empire and Spain. Francis I, I have no idea why there's a zero here.
Francis zero.
Francis. And yes, everybody called him Big Nose. This is Charles V. And this is a cautionary tale. I will show you more Habsburg photos down the road. But royal families married other members of the royal families, even if they're very closely related to them. And this is a cautionary tale against what? Marrying your cousin.
Who is that?
That's Charles V.
He looks like Lord Farquaad from Shrek.
Okay, but I will show you more Habsburg pictures. And you ever look at members of the royal family? They all look like horses in the royal family. That is why they're marrying cousins, close cousins.
Probably a mistake.
Don't do that. See, life lessons.
Why does a
And Clement II, the Pope after Julius, he is in the middle. He can't get too close to either one, and he's trying to play one off on the other, hoping that Rome isn't invaded. Yeah.
what happens to the previous pope when they're changed out?
Well, sometimes the Pope just resigns and goes into kind of a retirement, which happened. Pope Benedict resigned. That's where Pope Francis is now. But usually they die.
Okay. So why is Francis's head so small compared to the rest of them?
I don't. Yeah, that's actually kind of a proportional issue.
His head is
He
so
did have
small.
must have very broad shoulders. And the other thing is too, they called him Big Nose, and so making the small head really does extenuate. It really accentuate that nose, doesn't it? Okay, so in 1527, the French defeated a Holy Roman Empire army and brushed away the Papal States army, entered Rome and sacked it, devastating it, stealing and looting this.
How many times has Rome been sacked?
We're nearing the end. We got one more sack.
Feels like they've been
Of course,
sacked
I
at
was
least
in-
4 times.
I was in Rome when Rome won the Italian soccer football championship, and the fans pretty much sat Rome that for 2 days straight. It was.
I thought you meant you wrapped this Saturday.
Oh yeah, they're right there.
Just points to some random person.
And they murdered and destroyed, partially in revenge, but also goes to show you when they talk about all kinds of the lofty reasons to reestablish a church, what are they really doing?
Establishing their own form of church.
And also, they couldn't pay their mercenaries. And so how you pay your mercenaries? Take Rome, that's your pay. Meaning steal. And the big thing about this was, that basically ended the Italian Renaissance. The Renaissance would end with this moment. And the Pope never regained the power. The Pope is going to be more and more of a figurehead, a political figurehead, now obviously still incredibly powerfully religious. And Italy would be divided and would remain divided until it would finally be unified as a country. It's divided this whole time, remained divided until 1870, fully until 1871. That's why we have pizza. And this fighting, the Habsburg-Valais War, would end basically in a slight defeat for France in 1559. That's how long this thing lasted. Thus, the end of the Italian Renaissance. But we didn't get to art. Thus, the day the universe changed. So that's the notes. So the day the universe changed, this great series, those here last semester, we saw one. Hopefully this will record for the 5 people who are at home. I made this on one sheet for reasons I can't explain. But just use bullet points. I probably could, but I think I was trying to save paper, and then I realized there's still a back, which makes no sense. They do a really weird thing. If you print one side, they only charge you for 1 page, even though you're using a full sheet of paper. It doesn't make any sense. It's not by the ink; it's by paper.
That seems weird because ink would be like
There's no logic.
no. Then you can just put like a straight black sheet of paper with nothing but ink.
So, once again, I do not have captions for this. And so this goes through, the universe changed, all these great changes in thought, and this does the Renaissance, but also more. And everyone look at it, see if you can read it. I might put some shades out, because that's really bright.
It's like the lights are on and the lights are off.
Yeah, I won't do this again. I was sort of thinking, oh, I'll be responsible to save money for my department, and I realized that. Getting there.